Hello, my little mathematicians. Let's go ahead and explore absolute value together. Okay, so if we go ahead and take a look, it says the absolute value of a number is the number's distance from zero on a number line. So for example, the absolute value of -3 is 3, because if you look at -3, how far away is -3 from zero? It's 3 away. And then vice versa from that, the absolute value of +3 is also 3, because 3 is 3 away from zero. So because absolute value represents a distance, it is always non-negative. Okay? And then the reason that we don't say it's always positive is because 0 is neither negative nor positive. And what's the absolute value of 0? It's just 0. So that's the one exception to the rule. And that's why we don't say that they're always positive, but you will see that sometimes because the only exception to it is 0, and 0 is neither negative nor positive. But let's go ahead and give some of these a try. All right. The first one says, graph the following numbers on the number line, then use it to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of -7. Well, -7 is where? Right here. Okay, -7 is how far from 0? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 away. So -7, the absolute value of that is 7. And when I write the answer, I get rid of those absolute value bars. Okay, the next one says the absolute value of 5. So find 5. How far away is +5 from 0? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away. So the absolute value of 5 is just 5. And then the absolute value of 7, well, +7 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 away from 0. So it's +7. I hope you're seeing a trend here. Okay, the absolute value of -2. -2 is right here. And if you find the absolute value of that, how far is it from 0? It's 1, 2 away. So the absolute value of -2 is 2. What are you noticing about all the numbers? Whether it started as a negative or a positive, it ends as a positive, right? Because distances are positive. Okay, what's the absolute value of 4? We'll find 4. How far away is it from 0? 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see that after a while, you don't have to use the number line. You could just say, what's the absolute value of -4? How far away is 4 from 0? Or -4 from 0? It's 4 away. Okay, if you don't need to use the number line, that's okay. It's just there to help you in case you get confused. It's asking how far is that number from 0? And whether it's a negative or a positive, it's still a positive way away because distances are always positive. Right, I hope I've sent that message home by now. The next section says, which pairs of numbers have the same absolute value? And how are these numbers related? Did you find any from up here? Which ones have the same absolute value? Is there any that have the same absolute value of 7? Yeah, this one right here. So the absolute value of -7 and the absolute value of 7 both had the same answer. Any others? Yeah, the absolute value of 4 and the absolute value of -4 both had the same answer of 4. Okay, and why? Because they both are the same distance from 0. And what's the relationship to each other? Well, they're opposites of each other. The opposite of 4 is -4, and the opposite of -7 is 7. So when you take the absolute value of an opposite number, you'll still get the same numeric value. Okay. And then my next question asks me, negative numbers are less than positive numbers. Does this mean that the absolute value of a negative number must be less than the absolute value of a positive number? Explain. What do you think? Well, no, because yes, -4 is less than 4, but the absolute value of -4 is actually equal to the absolute value of 4. They're both equal to 4, right? And yes, -15 is less than +10, but when you take the absolute value of -15, that's +15, and the absolute value of 10 is just 10, and 15 is actually greater than 10. So is that true? No, definitely. We just found like 2 examples. Sometimes the absolute value can be equal to each other, and sometimes even though a number is negative and the other one's positive, one can actually be greater than the other when you take the absolute value of it. Just some things to think about. Okay, the main questions that we're going to get about these is opposites. Like, what's the opposite of 4? It's -4. What's the opposite of -7? It's 7. And then they'll also ask you, what's the absolute value of something? And whether you take the absolute value of a negative number or a positive number, you still get a positive answer. Okay, if we turn the page, okay, I want to focus on this question down below right here that says, must the absolute value of a number always be positive? Well, if you think about what we just said before, like whether it's a negative or a positive, when you take the absolute value of the number, the answer is a positive. So you would think yes, but as I said earlier at the beginning of the video, actually it's no, because that one exception, the absolute value of any number except 0 is always positive, and 0 is neither negative nor positive. So that kind of ruins the rule right there, just 0. Okay, but other than that, if you take the absolute value of a negative number or a positive number, yes, the answer will be a positive. The only exception to that is 0, because 0 is neither negative nor positive. I want to go ahead and actually try some more on our own that we'll actually see, like on a quiz or test, when we're dealing with absolute value. So let's go ahead and turn the page, and I want you to try these year turns up here. It says the temperature at night reached -13 degrees. Write an equivalent statement about the temperature using the absolute value of the number. So what it's saying is it wants you to write, what's the absolute value of -13? It's 13. And you're like, well, then how does that represent -13? So you're writing its relationship to 0. So if you're talking about -13 degrees, how is that relationship to 0? How do you explain that in words? Do you think you have it? Okay, so it would say something like the temperature reached 13 degrees Fahrenheit below 0. So it just wants you to represent it, not say -13. It wants you to use words to imply that it's a negative, but not actually say a negative. So you're describing its relationship to 0. Okay? And then the most common way you're going to see it is they're going to ask you, take the absolute value of these numbers. And when you see those bars, that's what absolute value means. Okay, so what's the absolute value of -12? 12. What's the absolute value of 91? 91. What's the absolute value of -55? Hopefully you're saying the answers before me. 55. What's the absolute value of 0? Just 0. 0 is 0 away from itself. Absolute value of 88? Just 88. Absolute value of 1? 1. Okay, now bonus for you. These are all the correct answers. But what if these absolute value bars were gone and they said, what's the opposite of -12? He would still say 12. What's the opposite of 91? It would have been -91. What's the opposite of -55? Positive 55. What's the opposite of 0? 0. It doesn't have an opposite because it's neither negative nor positive. What's the opposite of 88? -88. What's the opposite of 1? -1. Okay, so these were the answers for absolute value, but the ones I did verbally in this section, sometimes they also ask you opposites, and you would know if it would actually say the word, find the opposite of this, and there wouldn't be absolute value signs. All right, congratulations, my little mathematicians. You're on your way to understanding absolute value and opposites.